Charles, we've got a reckless crew today. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking, Jason. I hope you're well.
I am well.
I sent you, and it's going viral. This Hillary was either at the Munich conference or in Munich at another venue with the Czech, I think, foreign minister, and she went on some kind of a rant, and he said he tried to react to it and said, I think if people are going too far, in essence, he was criticizing Trump derangement syndrome, and she caustically said, well, what problems do you see? And what that are so divisive? And he went through a list, and she tried to interrupt him and bully him, and the crowd was having none of it, including the moderator. I mean, when I see these clips of Hillary Clinton, I am so happy for the role I played in 2015, 16, and afterwards, ensuring that bitch did not get the kind of power that she thinks still now that she deserves to have. I mean, she is somebody who has no moral compass, is frankly, I think, stupid. I go back to this. I don't know of any other case, and I know a lot of lawyers, of people who took 4 years to get through a 3-year course at Yale Law School, which is pass-fail, by the way. I mean, I don't buy the story that she's this gifted lawyer. I mean, remember the email in the WikiLeaks email? WikiLeaks email. Am I supposed to go to this cabinet meeting? No, of course not. You're Secretary of State. You're like 4th or 5th in seniority in the government. You shouldn't be at a cabinet meeting. Why would you do that? I mean, it's just a stupid-ass question. Even stupider to put it in an email. So when you look at these people that the mainstream press continues to try to elevate, there's this guy, there's these two Krasenstein brothers, I think, who are on X remain, and one is dumber than the next. But they were saying, before the early video came in of what AOC said, AOC just delivered remarks that no other rising leader in either party could have delivered to such an august audience in Munich. She sounded dumber than the clueless girls. And as I said in an X post just now, I mean, she'd have to study for decades and actually learn something to be as smart as a moron. And yet, she's trotting around there because she goes to Munich and I would argue without evidence, says in Munich, where Hitler rose to power, that Israel today is committing genocide in Palestine. I mean, that's a remarkable assertion to make, but to choose to do it in Munich, of all places, is absurd. And then her answer on what will America do if China invades Taiwan was, well, let's, I mean, and then Gretchen Whitmer, whatever her name is, Whitmer or whatever her name is, she's pretty stupid. And the word salad is out there alongside the Obamas celebrating Valentine's Day with her Dougie. And Barack is celebrating it with Mitch, M-I-C-H-E. Happy Valentine's Day, Mitch.
Oh.
I mean, you got to be kidding me. That's what you think you could pull over in 2026 and 2028? And James Carville is out there saying that the Republicans and Trump's and Magaland are going to get their just desserts after 26 and 28 when Democrats take control and go after Magaland. Yeah, I don't think so. That's not the way it's going to work, because what we're seeing here, it's one thing to make a decision. And when I was a younger person, I thought it would be kind of cool to be president of the United States. Then I went through my wedding reception, having to shake 400 hands, and turned to Clarissa and said, I will never even think about a political campaign, let alone running for president. And you make a decision to seek high office. And the benefits, I suppose, are that if you can do it legitimately, you can become quite wealthy afterwards. If you're a disciplined person and you have some accomplishments to speak of, you get book deals and speaking deals and business deals and all that kind of stuff. So economically and legitimately, it can be an interesting career path. But to do it the way the Clintons do it, and the Obamas do it, and the Bushes do it, it is such reckless behavior to think that you're never going to be caught. You'll never be a punishment for these obvious crimes. And in the case of the Clintons, the noose is tightening. I was very heartened to see that Lego Man, according to reports I saw, and I don't know if they're correct, currently has a team of 7 different lawyers trying to defend him. So, you don't hire 7 different lawyers to get out of a case that has no meat in it, right? He's in serious trouble coming. And eventually, it's going to make sense for one of these rats to start turning on the other rats. And the biggest unindicted and unprosecuted rats I can think of are the Obamas and the Clintons. And Trump just said again on Truth Social, this all goes back to Obama. So,
no videos of him as an ape?
Well, and Obama was asked about that, and he didn't, he just moved on from it. Look, the you want to see some vicious political cartoons? Go back and look at the ones they made about Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. I mean, this is nothing in modern times.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the same tools that we have now. So you don't go into politics because you have a thin skin. I mean, you have to assume that 20% of the electorate's going to hate you without reason, without rhyme or reason. They're just going to hate you. And they're going to say vicious things. And if you don't have a thick skin, try something else. Become a barber. You'll always have work. But the Epstein files, I still believe, or believe in more ardently, were handled in an abominable fashion. And these should have been studied in the first, certainly they should have been attended to in the first months, not, dragging this mess out, getting us into a place where you have to get an act passed and signed. And who knows how many files there actually are. I mean, you're much more of an expert on electronic files and files in general than I am, but my understanding is that video files take up a lot of memory. And Epstein, he didn't have all those video cameras and a special room full of monitors in his various places because he didn't care about what he was taping. I mean, why would you have all these different monitors? It's not like he had an art collection that he needed to protect that was really valuable. The same artist who, quote, trained Hunter Biden was probably making these pictures of Bush and Clinton and the other ones that we know about. And some of the ones that he bought are really disgusting. So I can't believe they're all that valuable. So why did he need these monitors? How many monitors were there? How come the FBI didn't come forward and tell us the truth about, start with a townhouse. Then let's turn to the Zorro Ranch. What the hell was going on there? Then let's turn to, you don't do all these kind of things for no reason at all. And, to me, it's crystal clear that Epstein was in the blackmailing business. The only question to me, or unanswered question, is who was his boss? Because when you see the tapes that we have seen, and I saw that tape for the first time of Epstein speaking, I mean, Epstein, but for the grace of God, if he is alive, or were he alive, not dead today, he'd be living in a fucking cardboard box telling everybody that, I almost got into NYU, ranting and raving with Methuselah about the future of the Dow. I mean, the guy's he's not a financial genius.
No. Pam Bondi went nuts about the Dow. Now, Charles, real quick, I just wanted to say about the video stuff, I first learned about this guy, this detective Mark Riccari, who he died in 2018 at the age of 50. He looks like a pretty fit guy. Now, I mean, this can happen, but it is unusual for somebody to die at 50. And he was leading the investigation from the Palm Beach County Police into Epstein. And remember, Joseph Riccari is this guy's name. And remember, Dugan,
right?
I got some buzzing on my audio here. Dugan ran a website that was all about whistleblowing. And this guy dropped some video on him from Epstein's house.
Mm-hmm. And then he dies unexpectedly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's chatter. I start on X looking to see what the latest news might be. And again, with that, you don't really know. People can post anything. You don't really know whether it's true or not until you do your own vetting. And I sent several to you, Jason, but there are people posting, and multiple different people posting, claiming that Epstein had something to do with 9/11. Now, it is interesting to me that nobody heard much about Epstein until after 9/11, when in 2000, the International Man of Mystery in the New York magazine Intelligencer section did a profile on him. And next thing you know, he's on a plane with Bono and Kevin Spacey and, either Chris Rock or Chris Tucker, I forget which, but a bunch of people going around Africa. Was it Tucker? Going around Africa, in theory, fighting HIV and AIDS. And, really before then, I may have heard of Jeffrey Epstein, but I think I don't recall hearing much about him. And but suddenly, after 9/11, he's got these jets, he's got these properties, he's living large. And again, as we said from the beginning, his entire resume is fiction. It just is. It's complete fiction. There is no way that guy was anything more than a tutor, maybe, associated with Dalton. At these private schools, you do have basically a two-track system. You've got some very smart kids, even at a place like Dalton, which is, maybe today it's good, but when I went through high school in New York City in the private schools, Dalton was a school for dumb rich kids. But in those types of schools, they're expensive now, very expensive now, and parents are all hoping their kids go to Harvard or a place like it. And when kids start, typically around 7th grade is when the tracking system begins, 7, 8. And if you're not in the honors classes, you're not going to Harvard. And if you get into the honors classes and you start getting C's or B's, you need a tutor. And so the tutor is not going to be a teacher, it's going to be somebody else. So maybe he was a tutor or proved to be a tutor, that's possible. But he certainly wasn't, I don't think, on the faculty at Dalton. Now, to go from that to getting a job at Bear Stearns, Ace Greenberg, I don't know if he's even still alive, but when he was alive and when Bear Stearns was alive, Ace Greenberg was a very interesting person whose hiring belief was he wanted to find people who were inherently smart, but had made mistakes and had gotten off track. And he loved to give those type of people a second chance. And so the idea that Ace Greenberg would have brought him in some limited capacity at Bear Stearns, that's possible. That's very possible. Because there are a lot of people on Wall Street who do well, particularly as traders, who don't have formal education. That does happen. These are the types of people you may remember from elementary school and high school who were constantly gambling, betting on this, betting on that. Those type of people who didn't have the time to study for class or whatever, they just wanted to fuck around and bet. And many of them are quite astute at that and go on to become multimillionaires, even billionaires. So that part of it makes sense. But then when he's at Bear Stearns to be forced out allegedly for insider trading, that's a career ender. Nobody wants to give money to an asset manager who on his record has to say, A, I was forced out of one investment bank, which wasn't really that great ever. And then B, I had the great common sense to go off and work for a guy who's now in prison for fraud. And with that great track record, I decided to set up my own mysterious advisory and consulting firm. It's just complete hogwash. No uncontaminated person would want anything to do with that bullshit. You don't need to be a graduate of Harvard Business School or somebody who spent a fair bit of time on Wall Street to see this. It's just common sense. You fuck up this way, at least 3 times, if not more, why would you give control? Because that's what you're doing when you hand over assets to a money manager. Why would you want to take the risk of interacting with this mysterious guy who can't explain how he has all these mansions? And then when you hear him talk, I mean, his interchange, which is something I would highly recommend people listen to, the Bannon excerpts and stuff, and then his interchange with Ehud Barak. I listened to that and said, this is a complete simpleton trying to gut his way through meetings with people who shouldn't be meeting with him in the first place. And to learn that he then has an office at Harvard and MIT, and he's out trying to raise money and interacting with Gates and Prince Andrew. This guy is, there was a case in, this is not the first time this kind of stuff has happened. In the 1400s, I believe, there was somebody called Perkin Welbeck who in France claimed, and France and England, of course, were enemies, claimed that he was the rightful heir to the British throne. And he managed to convince enough people in France that they spirited him into Scotland, with which France was close, because Scotland was hostile to England. And this guy made a real business for a while of pretending he was the rightful heir to the throne in England. You've had people more recently, you had Folieri, the guy claimed that he was close, his father was close to the Pope and had a sweetheart deal to sell off surplus Catholic church property around the world and in America. And that guy managed to talk his way into an investment partnership with Ron Burkle, who I believe is a legitimately smart private equity investor who was always interested in grocery stores and saw opportunities to buy grocery stores and improve them and sell them at a profit. And he did that many different times. And he's, one of those famous playboys who at the end of his career has now decided that he wants to devote himself more to philanthropy. I sat next to Ron Burkle's first wife and Ron Burkle at what I call the last wedding of the 1980s, which occurred around Valentine's Day in 1990. And it was just as Drexel Burnham was blowing up. And this is before Ron Burkle was huge. He was just trying to get to the next level. So there are plenty of people. There's one guy who pretended he was a Rockefeller, got away with that for a while. But I think Jeffrey Epstein is an imposter. And I think that Hillary Clinton is certainly has been pretending that she's somebody that she isn't for a very long time. I mean, she's certainly, if you think back to the absurd classes that she was teaching at graduate level in Columbia, where everything was scripted, and in her final class, she gave students a chance to ask her questions, and of course that was all micromanaged. And Taylor Swift was then, a demigod in life. I think she's been reduced since then. But one of the questions that this former Secretary of State deemed important enough to answer is, "What's your favorite Taylor Swift song?" You got to be fucking kidding. That's the kind of stuff that you might let a second grader ask you, but a graduate level person, that's the best question you have for Hillary Clinton? It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. I think this is a grounding problem here, Charles.
Okay. Does it involve me?
No.
Okay. So, and then as far as Bill is concerned, he writes, and on this issue of Reckless, which is a great poster, and I think a great title here, the powers that the President of the United States retain, that are retained by the President of the United States, are mighty indeed. I mean, there are these new weapons I've seen pictures of that vaporize mountains. We've got nuclear weapons. We've got, massive military assets all over the world. If the United States of America actually voted Bill Clinton into office twice, followed that up having George W. Bush in there twice, followed that up having Barack Obama in there twice, let the world struggle through 4 years under somebody who may have been Joe Biden, but whoever that person was not actually controlling the levers of power. Unbelievably reckless. And along the way, the largest issuer of government debt in the world is the United States. So normally in a securities offering, when you want to protect yourself as the underwriter, you have a section in the offering called a risk factor section. And lawyers will tell you that you want to basically come up with the longest list of risk factors that you ever possibly can consider, because what you're trying to protect yourself from is a lawsuit down the line where somebody says, I invested on a basis where I was assured A, B, and C wouldn't happen. In the risk factor section, that's where you say, well, there's a possibility of this, and there's a possibility of that, and there's a possibility of this other thing. I mean, you don't want to say there's a possibility that the President of the United States is a complete imposter and never was entitled to be President of the United States and has served 8 years as president unlawfully. That's the kind of stuff you wouldn't put in there. But there are many things you could put in there that are reasonable to put in there. And whether it's, I mean, certainly Bill Clinton, if you were to put together the truth about what was going on during the election of 1992, when Jennifer Flowers came into prominence and nearly cost Bill the nomination and the presidency, if you were to understand what they did to intimidate anybody who would tell the truth about Bill's brazen years, starting, I would argue, from probably Georgetown through Oxford, when he didn't finish Oxford, and then if you get into all those scandals, he never would have been president. And they've been very successful in a different era when the internets were not there, in stifling real inquiries into what was going on in Arkansas and elsewhere involving the Clintons. Similarly, with George W. Bush and the Bush family, people on the right have been very effective in stifling the truth about how the Bushes came to prominence before H.W., how the Bush family has profited off politics for decades, demerits and defects in both Bushes, H.W. and W. Very successful in stifling all that. And then when you get to Obama, I mean, he's trying to act like he's president emeritus and thinks that he can get away with his acolytes all saying that he had a scandal-free presidency. By the way, he just did an interview.
Benghazi.
Well, there's a long list of things. Strangling healthcare with Obamacare, endless crap. And he never got the economy. The way presidents normally are measured, are you better or worse off? Are you better off at the end of his presidency than you were at the beginning? And when you look at the trajectory...
Charles, sorry, I got to interrupt you because, first of all, we're about to head over to the First Amendment Forum, and I got to fix this grounding problem with the audio. So You had sent me something that I want us to look into, but I can't talk until I fix this. So we'll be back. People can stay with us. We'll be back with the audio fixed in 5 minutes, but we got to look at this clip here about the shell companies with Charlie Kirk.
Very good. Do that later, you mean?
Yeah, this audio problem is killing me. We'll be right back, everybody. Please bear with us during this little technical problem. I thought I had it licked at the outset, but I'm going to get it right now. Thanks for watching.